Looks good. That looks good. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. The only spiritual problem, the only spiritual challenge is to notice what is actually occurring, to notice what actuality is, to notice what this actual event consists of. And the problem being, of course, that it's easy to not notice that. It's easy to have erroneous understandings and ideas about it, which lead to all sorts of mistaken and confused implications that can bog one down and get one caught up in all sorts of irrelevancies. Actuality is absolutely complete in the instant. In the instant that your experience appears, which of course happens with absolutely zero time lag, with absolutely zero time gap. There's no delay between experience appearing and it being perceived, as if that was two different things. The appearance of the experience in the present moment is the total event. There is nothing else. There is nothing else happening than the appearance of your experience in real time, which means instantly, instantaneously. It has no duration. It's just this instantaneous flash, which presents as all this, everything, bang, and it's completely done, entirely complete in that apparition. All event, all functionality, all occurrence is nothing other than this continual instantaneous flash of presence. Naturally, it's completely impossible to define it, to consciously assimilate it, to say what it is, to label it accurately, to have an accurate narration about it, to have an interpretation that is comprehensive. But fortunately, of course, this is completely unnecessary, because in the instant of its presence, in the instant of the presence of experience, which of course is always instantaneous, it's always exactly now, everything is done. Everything's taken care of. It's all happening. It's all being done. It's being done inherently. It's being done spontaneously by what it is, accomplishing what it is, and that's it. And all human narration and drama and getting caught up in things is after the fact and is superfluous and has absolutely nothing to do, essentially, with the actual event. So all the stuff we get torqued up about, all the stuff we worry about and obsess about is absolute fantasy, absolute delusion. Now, functionally, from the spiritual point of view, from the point of view of a yogi, yoga is participating with your experience in the way that you actually are, which is to notice the actual event of this instantaneous flash of presence. And its nature. Its nature is, well, let's say from the yogic point of view, the most important point of its nature is it is a hyper-intelligent assimilation. Instantly, in the moment of experience, everything appears, and this appearance is not an inert thing. It's not just a mechanical event that's somehow out there, lifeless. Everything appears and is instantaneously assimilated with an inconceivably functional intelligence, which you happen to be, which your consciousness actually is. In an instant, you walk into a place you've never been, you open your eyes. In that instant, your inconceivably hyper-functional intelligence perceives every single flash of light and color that is there. You can't designate it, you can't name it right away. Maybe you have to sort of sit back and think about what it is, but bang! It's all there. This is not just mechanical. This is not just dead. This is not just an inert, objective fact. It is an exercise of inconceivable intelligent functionality that consciousness inherently consists of, that you inherently consist of. You are this consciousness. You are this hyperintelligence that effortlessly assimilates your experience in real time. No gap. There's no processing time. It's not like this inherent intelligence needs to sit back and think, well, I think I'm seeing green over there. I think maybe I'm seeing sort of a white over there. It's not like that, is it? It's just bang, it appears. It is what it is. There may be a gap before you can name it. There may be a gap before you can start spouting stories about it, narrations and interpretations. But the apparition is completely instant. So this inherent intelligence of the consciousness that you are is continually leaning into, instantaneously engaged with the full field of apparition of all experiential energy phenomena that appear as your experience, continually, in the instant, right? Effortlessly, inherently, spontaneously. And discovering this is what defines a yogi, discovering that you are this intelligence. It's not an intelligence that sits back and thinks. It's not an intelligence that uses words. It's not an intelligence that analyzes or that is rational. It is intelligence that is here, now, always, effortlessly. You can't turn it off. You can't stop it. And you are this, and noticing that you are this and coming to sort of appreciate this fact, and I guess you could say conceptually come into synchronization with this actuality, makes you a yogi, makes you engage with reality as it actually is. And the implications of this condition, the implications of this functioning, are wildly different than the implications of being a person with a persona and a role in life and success and failure and all the stuff that spins out of this endless analysis and drama that we're also familiar with, sort of normal human functioning. How was your day today? What did you do? Oh gosh, this and that and the other. No. This, right now, this is your day. And you can't say anything about it. As soon as you start talking about it, you're just spinning bullshit. You're just telling stories that are incredible partializations, You're not including that particular shade of pink that appeared in that instantaneous flash of your experience. How can you include everything in your experience in a narration? How could you verbalize every color that you perceive right now? How could that happen? But you don't need to, because in the perceiving of it, in its apparition, it's done, it's finished, it's done everything it needs to do. The entire functioning of reality occurs in its appearance. There's nothing missing, there's nothing left over, there's nothing that needs to be done. There's no loose ends that need to be tied up, no T's that need to be crossed or I's that need to be dotted. So in simply being in the presence of experience, which is the totality of reality, everything is completely done, everything is sufficient, everything is finished. The present, the entire universe is finished in the apparition of the present moment. And this is continually and ongoingly the case. So, and still, we're human beings, so we think and we function and we have emotions and we get involved in situations and extricate ourselves from it. But that's just irrelevant. That's just, fine points that comes with this incredibly precise, incredibly sharp and actual panorama of energies that constitutes the actuality of your experience. Ooh, look at donut. It gets better and better. So, so all of the secrecy and the incredible, complications around spirituality are mostly superfluities about this one fact of coming to notice the actuality of real-time presence, of real-time experience. And of course, saying real-time presence or real-time experience is redundant because there's no non-real-time presence or no non-real-time experience. It's all now. This is the entire shooting match is now. Always, of course, self-evidently. And that's what all the fuss is about. That's the entire, I mean, you could take, 3,000 years of Tibetan Buddhists and 10,000 tantras dictated by transcendental Sambhogakaya Buddhas from the, for the last thousands of years, and the seven heavens and this and that and the other. And all it's really about is this simple fact. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. So, we're done here. I hope you guys had fun. It's been lovely to see you.
But we haven't finished the chai.
No, right. There's more chai.
More the article.
So I've, in keeping with the august traditions of spiritual obfuscation, I've coined this name, Yoga of Radiant Presence, for this very simple, self-evident engagement of noticing what's actually going on here, which is arbitrary, as all names are, and yet is meaningful to a certain extent, in the sense that this event is certainly present. It is presence. You can't say exactly what that is, but nonetheless, this is it, if anything is. And it is radiant in the sense that it unendingly presents with this incredible, inconceivable plethora and spectrum of detail and information and experiential qualitativeness, all these colors and sounds and thoughts and vibes and flavors and qualities that are just, again, instantly self-evident in real time, of course, ongoingly. So it's always present. It always is present as this sea of implication, the sea of apparent information that never resolves to anything. It never collapses into stability or coherence. You can never sort it out or figure it out. It's completely, dizzying in its astounding implication and quantity. But it doesn't need to be resolved because, again, its apparition is the entirety of its functioning, of its process, of its nature. All it needs to do is show up, and it's Miller time. It's done. and of course that happens. That happens always, every instant, unfailingly, unceasingly, unstoppably. You can't make it not happen. There's no off switch. I mean, you can be stone drunk and sick with the flu and dying of cancer, and still the present moment is right here, bang, doing its whole thing. It's not about individual functionality. It's not about what you're doing or not doing, how healthy or sick you are, how clear or unclear you are. All of that is just window dressing. All of that is just more human drama. It's just that instantaneous presence of experience itself. It's the whole shooting match, the entire shooting match. And it, of course, completely transcends analysis. It completely transcends parsing it or sorting it out or making sense of it or saying what it is or saying what it isn't or anything else, because it's, by its very nature, you can't do it. Try and say what's going on. Try and say what the present moment is. Try and say what's happening. Try and say how it's happening. Try and say where it's going. Try and say what it's doing. Try and say what anything is. I mean, humans have been doing this since the beginning of time, since language was discovered. And no one has succeeded yet. They're never gonna. It can't be said. Because this transcends analysis. It transcends description. It's literally infinite in its quantity and its quality. But again, that doesn't matter because you don't need to make sense of it. You don't need to describe it. You don't need to sort it out because in its apparition, everything's done. It's okay. Check that off. Reality is taken care of. Just in the apparition. You know, we humans' idea that we have to sort something out or figure something out or make something happen is so pathetically inane, so pathetically absurd, because reality is taken care of just in being. And of course, everything comes with, because all of even our human functioning and our thinking and our emotionalizing and our getting twisted up in our silly ideas happens in real time. So it's already a done deal too. So it comes with. I mean, nothing is excluded from this present moment. But most especially, nothing needs to be done about it. It doesn't need to be made sense of. It doesn't need to be analyzed. It doesn't need to be engaged with or not engaged with, because you can't. How can you not engage with the appearance of the experience in the present moment? The fact of its appearing means this engagement's already happening. And the real you, which is this astounding intelligence, which is intrinsically perceiving this, is already doing that. Which is why it's Miller time. Always. It's always 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Apologies to any 12-step or recovery in the audience. This is not a specifically addressing the issue of substance abuse, but that's available for those who are interested. But of course, joking aside, discovering the incredible comprehensiveness of the inherent engagement, that you are already completely engaged with reality just by the apparition of your experience. Coming to appreciate, coming to notice that this is not sort of the starting point upon which you build, making sense of it or sorting it out or doing something about it. The apparition of it is the entire show. And you are already completely engaged in that show, but it's on a level of inherent intelligence that we as humans don't ordinarily think of as us. We don't ordinarily think of it as intelligence. My intelligence is sort of me sitting back and being clever and thinking about things and, figuring things out and being able to say clever things or do clever things. But that's a very, very small harmonic of the actuality of intelligence. The actuality of intelligence is what is putting all this here, doing the laws of physics, making the sun shine, making my heart beat and my blood pressure be regulated such as it is, and my breakfast be digested. That's being done now with absolute engagement, with absolute functionality, already completely. And what's doing it? What I am is doing it. This astounding intelligence that I am, that I can't not be. It just happens. It's not a claim to fame or anything. It just happens to be the case that there is this intelligence which is running all of reality, and it happens to be what I am because there's nothing else. So how could I not be it? How could anything not be it? The sun is this intelligence. The earth is this intelligence. The laws of physics are this intelligence. And I am this intelligence. And noticing that fact is yoga. And the ongoing self-evident participation in this fact is yoga. And you're a yogi when you notice this fact and enjoy the ongoing participation in it. Yes.
There is pounding on the door of this awareness, a constant small part that says, wait a minute, I have something to say.
Of course.
As I go about my doing, that something gets noisier.
Mm-hmm.
And it appears with my perception, or seems to.
It does. I'm sorry. It does what with your perception?
It seems to interfere with my perception, so that I stop being in it. I stop not being aware, but I stop being aware of my awareness.
Right, but that awareness that you stop being aware of is not the important awareness. The important awareness is the awareness within which all of that event that you just described is appearing.
Yes.
And that it appears at all is the actual event. And then this sort of meta-awareness that we can, this meta-clarity that we can have or not have, this meta-awareness that we can lose or be distracted, that we can have or be distracted from, is just gamesmanship. It's irrelevant. It's not that it's not occurring, it's just that it has nothing, it has no importance in the actuality. It's the appearance of anything that is the actual event, the important event. So it's in the appearance of all that importance subsists, not in what appears. So confusion can be appearing. Total emotional identification can be appearing. Neuroses and psychoses can be appearing. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Because what matters is the appearing itself, the shining forth.
Okay, but, and
Which is very inhuman.
I have these instincts,
Mm-hmm.
these things that are built in that say, this might impact my survival. Therefore,
Sure.
I need to deal, I need to
Right.
project, I need to get out of the present moment and look at what might
Sure.
happen if I do not act or if I do act, etc.
Sure.
And while they're necessary, they're also intrusive and they're irritating.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Irritation can appear. Intrusion can appear. All sorts of sound and fury signifying nothing can appear. But it's in its appearance that the importance lies, not in what is appearing. And certainly, your functionality, your survival, your call it your survivability, is happening in real time. Obviously it's been sufficient thus far. Here you are. And it may seem to have all of this convoluted process and figuring out and worrying about this and planning that and wondering should I or shouldn't I do this and all of these various other things. But that's not the actual level at which the event of surviving takes place. The event of surviving takes place in real-time engagement. You eat or don't eat now, not in the thinking about it. You get out of the way of an oncoming car now, not by thinking about it, and so on and so forth. So anything can occur. All of these psychological events and stuff that so much of our human attention is absorbed by, obviously occurs, but they don't have the importance that they seem to have. We are very narcissistic. I would argue we are as a culture, as a species, maybe certainly as a culture, we are all caught up in all the urgency and life-urging importance of all the things that we get all torqued up about, and all these, I'm worrying about this, and I'm trying to do this, and I'm trying to improve my this, and I'm trying to avoid my that, and all this stuff. But it's all just a superfluous narration. The actual surviving is already a done deal, or not, in real time.
Yeah. Well, okay. That being said, then we don't need to sit here and continue to inquire or describe if we really get it.
Absolutely.
We can just leave.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. There's nothing here that isn't everywhere.
Yeah. My sentence exactly, and yet month after month we seem, or the group, or us in general, seem to have a need to talk about it, describe it.
Well, there's nothing lost in coming here and talking about it. There's nothing gained. But there's nothing gained in leaving, or nothing lost. It's just a matter of inclination, and your inclination is largely irrelevant. Please yourself. Do what you find. Do what your inclination draws you towards as interesting, or entertaining, or meaningful, or relevant, because it all, it's irrelevant to the actual primal event. to the actual real-time apparition of reality, whether you're here or in a movie theater or in a bar, right? So if you're inclined to be here, no problem. If you're inclined to be in a bar, no problem. You know, if you're inclined to be out, you know, robbing banks, no problem. Yeah.
So this is a game we're playing.
Right.
What can I do to make the game more fun?
Well, that's between you and your therapist. It depends. That depends on what is fun to you, and again, your artfulness in being able to pursue that and engage in that. You know, I like to play music, so I spend a certain amount of time playing music. I like to work with people in exploring these kinds of things, so I spend a certain amount of time doing that. I like to eat good food, so I spend a large amount of time eating good food. And I like to hang out and be entertained, so sometimes I read silly novels or watch a movie or something like that. But that's my answer to the question. But everyone will come up with a different answer.
Actually, I meant the game that you're playing right now about what is real and what is illusion. What the game that you're talking about.
Right. There's no such.
This game more fun.
Oh, well, it depends what you. The max fun comes in spirituality, true spirituality, which is what I'm talking about. I would argue, fun comes from appreciation, and appreciation comes from noticing or from recognition. So I would argue recognition is fun because recognition leads to appreciation, which is fun. I mean, calling it fun is a little lightweight. I would say it's more satisfying, or somehow call it nourishing, but fun works too, for me anyway.
Yes.
So again, it's a matter of recognition and appreciation, and what is to be recognized is this actual event of the real-time apparition of your experience, and the fact that is comprehensive, that there is nothing whatsoever other than this.
I keep finding myself getting to that recognition repeatedly, to where I keep saying, now what? And so then, what do I do with that insight? But
the you that is doing all that, the I that is getting to it and asking these questions, is not the real you.
Yeah, I got that.
So it's a matter of this is where the appreciation and recognition comes in. It's recognizing the you that is actually doing all this with inconceivable engagement and intelligence inherently, effortlessly. You know, it's not like, oh, let me see, I need to experience the present moment. It's not like that, is it? It's just bang. You can't stop it. You can't turn it off. And again, as human beings, when we identify with our psychological selves, or some self that lives in our head or something, we tend to think of all that level of reality, just the apparition of experiences, and just an inert, objective fact. It has nothing to do with us. Instead of noticing and of course appreciating with the implications that come along with it, how profoundly it is an active engagement. And it's not an active engagement, again, that we're deciding to do or that we can decide not to do. And yet it is an active engagement that we are most certainly doing with inconceivable functionality and intelligence. And noticing this, we discover something about ourselves. We discover, wow, gee, this is me. This is me. I mean, this incredible potency that is actually engaged spontaneously and effortlessly with the full field of my actual experience. Wow. I mean, it's kind of throws the doors open. It's like, wow, there's more going on here than meets the eye. I'm kind of an interesting phenomena. And so right away that opens the door to investigating this, to appreciating it, to playing with it, poking at it, noticing it, again, sort of recognizing it and appreciating it, along with which comes a real reorientation of self-image, sense of self, and sense of stuckness, sense of empowerment, all these kinds of things, which part and parcel has been called enlightenment and so on. down the years, among other things.
It's essentially the engagement of life.
Yeah, or noticing that you are, in fact, already completely engaged with life. But the you that is doing that is the real you, which you may or may not be used to owning or appreciating or acknowledging. So it's kind of a opening the doors to an inclusion of, wow, I am really doing this. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that amazing? Because I'm not used to thinking of myself as doing this. I'm used to thinking of it, me as being sort of over here thinking about it. And that's happening too. That's also appearing, certainly. That's sort of a harmonic aspect of what's appearing. But that's more in the content of what's appearing, not in the action of appearing itself, which is kind of what we're indicating here.
I'd like to turn down the volume of the harmonics.
Right. But this is possible because as you play with this, you'll discover you have this phenomena of this appearance has an astounding multidimensionality and richness of aspects that it presents itself in that are available to navigate through and to engage with selectively. In other words, you'll discover you can kind of shift your focus to some extent, and you can kind of shift channels to some extent and notice different aspects of what's appearing. And as one discovers this, one can partake of that, and part of the trick of that is one discovers that experience does not have to be an either or. A lot of spirituality is presented as, I have to slow down my thoughts and then I'll be free of them, or whatever, this kind of thing. And that's not the case. You don't actually need to slow down your thoughts. You just need to go somewhere else where your thoughts aren't happening, right? Go to your field of vision. There's no thinking in the field of vision. Go to if your thoughts are here, go over here somewhere. I mean, again, this is speaking sort of spatially, and of course experience isn't actually arrayed spatially, but it's a kind of a metaspatial. And again, as one appreciates and recognizes this condition as it actually is, this becomes more or less self-evident. One discovers the amazing ranges that experience presents itself in, and one discovers that one can actually sort of have some degree of freedom to navigate within this and be with different portions of it, without needing to change or shut down or deny or do anything about other portions of it. You just sort of sidestep them. You go over here. If there's too much thinking over here, you go over here. If there's not enough thinking over here, you go over here. Again, it's just become sort of please yourself.
Well, I think of the word preordained in it, that, like you say, that reality below this wonderful reality. I think I'm making decisions. I think I'm doing this, that, and the other, but anyway, it's preordained, and I just sort of have to surrender to that.
Well, yeah, but it's even more profound than that, because you don't need to surrender to it. You notice that you are, in fact, already completely engaged with that level of it. So there's no surrendering necessary. The you that would be doing the surrendering is a pretend you that isn't the real you. Because because what you're surrendering to you is the actual you, which is already completely engaged with all of it.
You don't think it would, well, as far as I'm concerned, if I have that concept, I'm not going to get so wound up in thinking I'm responsible and I have to make the decision.
Sure. Yeah, sure, all that. But again, when you see the actuality, it doesn't matter how you think of it, because the self-verifying nature of what this is, it takes care of all that. You don't need to think one way. You don't need to think about it one way or another. There's no way to strategize with regard to it. You just see it, and in that seeing, you spontaneously adjust to the way that it actually is.
That's great.
I had something happen about 5 days after our last meeting, and my mind has been chewing on it ever since. I'm in the bus, and I'm listening to a talk. And I'm looking out, and I see the contents of the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the world going by outside, cars, buildings, people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's happening. All of a sudden, there's this complete shift. Like reality was just gushing forth, and I'm witnessing it.
Mm-hmm.
Except to say that I'm witnessing it is the thought that there's two things going on.
Right.
It's more like everything is going on, and I'm it going on, and I experience it going on.
Right.
And afterwards, but actually during, it occurred to me as a lucid dream,
Mm-hmm.
just like a lucid dream.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was so real, and I was not the lucid dreamer. I was part of the lucid dream. That is me sitting in the seat.
Right.
It was one whole event, and it was. It was a really big event,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I realize that that's our actuality, that's ordinary, but it feels like I slipped behind the curtain,
Mm-hmm.
and so everything that you spoke this morning, it's just like, that's what's going on, that's what happened, and it was like, I would say it was seconds long, but it could even have been a half a second.
Well, how is that different, what you're describing, from what's happening right now?
Well, it's not different at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more like the experience was, there's not objects.
Right.
There's not time.
Right.
There's just this flow.
Mm-hmm.
And the realization afterwards was what the thought was, that the universe could not operate any other way.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way the universe could possibly operate, is in this, it's being this like instantaneous instantaneousness.
Sure. Well, this is what we're talking about, and this is very much in line with what we were discussing a few minutes ago. There's many, 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 well, say many, many, many is silly, infinite different ways that this can present itself, or another way to put that this can be engaged with, or this can seem to be. You can be with this as just the instantaneous, totally non-analytical presence of this, like you're describing. You can be in psychological space and arguing with yourself in your head and emotional torment. You can be, in deep sleep. You can be in, I mean, it's silly for me to sort of give examples, but there's all of these different perspectives, as we all know, within which you can be engaged with your experience. And there's no hierarchy. There's no better or worse way. There's no truer or less true way. They are all different perspectives on this actuality, and they each have a different implication and a different, let's say, dominant flavor, perhaps. But none of them are true. None of them are untrue. They are just seemings of what this actuality is. And this actuality doesn't collapse down to any of these seemings. The actuality is entirely and absolutely transcendent. And I don't mean that in some abstract sense. I mean that in a very concrete sense. In other words, what this is right here, right now, is not anything that is a thing that you can go and draw a circle around and say, yeah, this is it. It is completely actual. It is completely specific, but it's also entirely more than itself. I mean, how weird is that? It's just completely, it's that which looks however it happens to be looking at the moment, or at any moment. So it can look like being caught up in psychological space and being a neurotic human being. It can look like having these amazing glimpses of, incredible, flow of non-spatial, non-temporal, transcendental energies. It can look like this, that, and the other. But what is it? Well, you can't say. But it is real. It is actual. It is right here, right now, always, and you are it. And when you discover that, you'll discover, well, gosh, I'm not actually stuck in any particular point of view. I can go to psychological space. I can go to these other spaces. I can go to deep sleep. I can go to this sort of absolute darkness, relative eventlessness. I can go to all these things just instantly, just by going there, because they're all right here. They're all just perspectives on this, seemings, virtual modes of presentation, call it, of this actuality. And you're all of them. And there's no hierarchy. None of them are true or false, more false than anything else. Which is part of the reason why we're so confused, because this is confusing as hell. This doesn't fall together into any kind of coherence or any kind of there's no map to this weirdness that we happen to be in. It's just these endless virtual perspectives from any of which it seems to be, however it seems to be, and these don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. It can be very bewildering because, as we're all familiar with, we can seem to have this one strong sort of a psychological perspective where we seem to be an individual and we're all worried about this and that, and we have identifications and emotions and our narrations and our, personal drama and woe is me kind of stuff ongoingly. But that's not more or less true than, or you can be with just a presence of light shining, presence of sound, just here. Or you can be with, anything. There's all these different things. And it's kind of schizophrenic. So, because the inclination, if we're naive, is, well, am I this or am I that? Is this true or is that true? Is this real or is that real? What's the relationship between them? And it's only confusing if you try to sort it out. When you get that it doesn't make any sense, when you get that it's gibberish, then all of a sudden it's very simple. Because it's confusing because it's confusing. It's confusing because there's no pattern to it. So it can seem like anything, and yet it is itself, and there's no scale to it. There's no overview in which it all fits together in some nice way that you can sort of tie up in a bow and,
It seems like if one goes into a psychological realm, or there's activity, whatever it is, it seems like it's a shift in the experience within this bubble that you say.
Good. Well, there's all these different shifts.
I mean that it's still happening. It's still it's still radiant presence, no matter what
always
occurs.
has. Yeah. I mean, this is what you discover. It can, the formula that I put it, which is, it sounds very simple, but it's very comprehensive, and it can look like anything, but it never departs from itself. It's always exactly what it is, but it can look like anything, which makes it pretty friggin' slippery. I mean, what do you do with that? I'm trying to get hold of it. Have I got hold of it? Yeah. What have I got hold of? But wait a minute, what's that over there? So again, it is this one thing that presents as anything, basically incoherently, basically chaotically. And again, the sort of the naive fantasy is that, but in some way it all makes sense, in some way it all fits together, and I just haven't got the big picture yet. There's no big picture. It's like dreams at night. There's no like meta dream that all your dreams you've ever had are going to fit into and make sense. They're all just snippets of weirdness, endless weirdness. And all of experience is exactly that. But all this endless incoherent weirdness, which does not resolve with itself, or even or any portion of it resolve even in isolation, all this endless weirdness is the way that this actuality that you are and that alone exists presents itself. And it is not limited to these modes of presentation. It is more than any and all of them. It is an astounding completeness, an astounding fullness, but you're never going to get to the bottom of what it is. You're never going to be able to write a thesis that defines it. But you don't need to, because you are it. It's already finished. It's already complete. It's already ongoing right here, right now, always, just like usual. And yet its very mode is these endless, weird seemings, weird presentations, seeming to be this and that, posing all sorts of seeming issues and seeming unresolvednesses and seeming, whatever. But none of this means anything except as the interfaces or the symptoms, or call it the modes of presentation of this actuality that is ongoing, that you actually are.
It seems like there's a surrender to mystery, to chaos, to incoherence,
Sure.
to confusion.
Sure.
Just to like,
But again, when you see it, you don't need to surrender to it because it's just self-evidently the case. It's more of an education than a surrender. It's like, oh, interesting. It's not like, oh, there's a me that needs to surrender to it. It's just, oh, gee whiz. So chaos reigns supreme, right? I always suspected. But everyone around me was pretending like they knew something, right? Arrogant assholes.
Yeah, you said recently about being with experience in sort of in a raw and direct and uncontrolled way as possible, and I find that I'm most sort of uncontrolled with that when I'm either falling asleep and noticing, or when I'm sick.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden it becomes sort of easy to slip into more controlled way of noticing or being with things. But the perfume of that though extends to regular life, where I mean it's kind of easy when I'm falling asleep to say, oh, I know what that is, but there's no words for it, and all these subtle things to talk about that are going on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the perfume of that does go into the regular life. I noticed that when I'm helping and I'm awake during the day, that the noticing tends to be a little bit more stodgy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've spoken about the tyranny of focus, that we think that we can only know something or discover things if we're focused on something, when really that's not the case at all, and it's actually impossible to really focus. I don't know what the question is, and I think it's more like I think that there's noticing isn't a controllable thing, and you can start off controlling it, like
Okay.
I guess.
I would say from what you're saying, you're not appreciating the fullness, the depth of noticing. Stodginess is a major mode of noticing. Notice stodginess. This can look like stodginess. It can look like stuckness. It can look like neurotic not seeing, neurotic myopia. It can look like sitting around saying, what am I doing? How come I'm such a fool and I can't connect with anything? It can look like that. Reality can present that way. And but again, so to define noticing as, of openness or of this or of that is, again, you're putting an artificial value scale, which obscures the actuality, which is that any mode is reality. Confusion is reality. Being lost in hopeless identification and identified with focus is reality. That's the sum of its major modes, as we all know. And they're not any better or worse than these wild modes of like wow and sparkles and the whole deal. It's all anything goes. It can look like anything. It can look like anything. And the anything includes nothing. It includes bullshit. It includes the horror of human normalcy and psychological engagement and all that. And those are all intrinsically and absolutely transcendental. So again, we're so used to playing oh, that's it, this isn't, kind of a game. And that is, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Well, okay, let's say I'm in one of the normal modes where everything's sort of taken for granted.
Uh-huh.
I'll go, well, I can pay attention to quality of light. So I'll do something.
But you're still trying to get out of the normalcy.
Yeah, but what is there to notice about normalcy? I mean,
how does it happen? Where does normalcy come from? Where does dullness come from? Where does thickness and stupidity come from? I mean, they're miraculous apparitions. But think about it. It's not like they're just here and then this amazing stuff is over there. Where did the just here come from? You know, and I don't say this just to be devil's advocate or to be facetious, but literally, I mean, this is probably in practice, the major subtle impediment to yoga is this kind of grass is greener thing of thinking it's over there. You know, if I just had a better, deeper samadhi, if I could just get out of my thoughts, if I could just get out of a focus, if I could just get to, you know, more weird visual phenomena, if I could just get to this, if I could just get to that, it's going to be, then I'm going to be winning the game. But if I'm over here, I'm losing the game. You know, there's less here and more there. There's bad here and good there. And that is the problem. That's not just an aspect. An aspect. That is actually the only problem, is failing to appreciate that this is it, whatever the hell this looks like. And that's what real noticing, I mean, the high watermark of noticing is noticing that dullness, confusion, contraction, stupidity is absolutely impossible, miraculous transcendence. That's what liberation looks like. That's when you're free. Because you're even free of being a jerk. You're even free of being, you know, just horrible, within this horrible human condition without needing to solve it or eradicate it. As long as you need to get out of it, you're just a rat in a maze. And as long as you're a rat in a maze, that's what bondage looks like.
But is an appreciation of that also kind of a grass is
Well, that's what noticing is. But appreciation of that is not a condition to be striven for. Not appreciating it is appreciating it. Appreciate not appreciating it. I mean, that's just how does dullness happen? How does stupidity, how does not noticing happen? Not noticing is absolutely miraculous. Where does it come from? What's doing it? I mean, really. And again, I'm not being silly or facetious. Literally, you know. I'm at home. Say I'm at home and I'm having a snippy argument with my wife, and I'm getting cross about this or that or the other. That is what the transcendent infinite happens to look like at the moment. You know, or say I'm like out in the sun and I'm looking at the sky and I'm seeing these amazing light rays, and that is what transcendent infinity happens to look like at that moment. One is not better than the other. If you prefer the one more over the other, and you can figure out a way to have that happen more, have at it. But that's just a matter of preference. That's not a matter of actual achievement. Real achievement is discovering the absolute inclusiveness, inescapability of the transcendental. There is nothing but. And discovering that fact, that's what liberation looks like, because then you're liberated in any condition. It's not, you're not just liberated, you're not a fair weather, I'm a fair weather realized person. When things are going great, and the angels are singing and the sun is shining, then I'm like, it's spiritual, you know. But just have some jerk cut me off on the highway and give me the finger while my wife's yelling at me. Where's God then? And the answer is right here, always. Yeah.
Don't know if I have a specific question. I came with one and I realized you can't answer it.
Cool.
There is no answer. But my observations is I've been feeling totally lost and realizing it's this conglomeration of a personality that I really don't know who the heck I am anymore. I know what I'm not, and yet I keep identifying, and I'm at the point of tired of searching.
Right.
And this body has the winter depression, and just being with the pain and depression, but also the beauty and the joy. Like last night when I was making, the potluck, I was, I got back into the old film, so the depression's there, but yet I'm also singing and dancing like Gene Kelly and Judy Garland while chopping. And to have the tears and the joy at the same time, I said, this is schizophrenic. I said, no, this is.
Yeah.
And getting tired of labels. And what you were talking about, I had a spiritual CD on, and I'm in my car. Oh, I let this person go. There was all this traffic. This was 3 weeks ago. And, I'm like, okay. And this guy behind me, and so finally, part of me came out, and the finger came. And I'm lucky to be alive because he got out of his car and I was almost me. And I said, okay, instant karma, okay, spiritual fate. And I'm like, okay, this was personality acting up, and it worked too. But for me, what I'm finding is when you're talking about things that make you happy, music. And I like coming here, being around people who understand, because I try to mention this to my friends, like, well, you should be doing this and this. I'm tired of doing. I'm tired of this or that, and it's like, let the depression be.
Yeah.
And what really awakened me was, I work for a company that, bless them, they have good points and bad, according to my judgment. You know, because it is what it is, and in reality, you have to do this, and there's a 2-hour rule. If you call out sick, you have to call in within 2 hours, otherwise you get written up. And if you call in late or you come late, if it's over 15 minutes, that could be, you know, woo. And I was starting to have a bad asthma attack. And I'm like, oh no, it's only an hour. So I forced myself to go to work at the point if I could have ended up in the ER dead. And then I'm like, what would happen if I died? And I started getting with it. And right now the body, the lungs in my body are not functioning as well.
Mm-hmm.
So not able to do as much. And it doesn't have to interfere with the joy. I can feel the fear. I can feel depression, joy.
Yeah.
And I just feel totally lost. But I'm tired of being confused, and it's okay to be, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I have no words for it, and I just don't know what to do, and everybody has suggestions. It's like, no. And I also have a sensitive nervous system, hypersensitive to sound, which is why being in retail isn't the greatest. And sensitivity to light. And realizing it's okay to make a change. Perhaps I don't need to be proof of point anymore, which is what my ego consciousness, I should be. Oh, when somebody comes in and pissed because they're in a crowded store at lunchtime and I'm helping someone else, excuse me, I'm going to complain. I'm like, hey, this person must be in. And I'm tired of having all that compassion for them. It's like, oh, no, the customer's over, so I bend over. I haven't got enough evil food for that anymore. And there's anger and resentment, and it's like, that's what it's like in the moment. It's personality. But I don't even want to judge the people on top anymore because I see they're under pressure. The whole thing, you know, being gay, and then that Robertson, and it's like, oh, the Bible, but in his reality, you know, and I can't, you know, to judge him. It's like, okay, you know, and this one, I cracked a friend up. This one minister was saying gays and lesbians have something non-human in me. I said, oh my God, I've got a non-human in me. Oh my God, and you know, it's so sometimes I just cry at the drop of a hat, and then it passes, and you know, I was going to ask you, should I quit work? What do I do? And it's like, there's nothing. I'm just with it. And it's beautiful, and it hurts like hell. And it doesn't. And it's okay.
Yeah. I realize that wasn't really a question, which is absolutely great. But what that rouses in me is the observation that it can be really valuable to realize that people are insane. And by people, I mean you. I mean me. I mean you. I mean you. I mean you. There's no such thing as a sane person. So everyone walking around with a personality, which is everyone, and with a mind, which is everyone, is a crazy person. We're all scarred, we're all neurotic, we're all damaged, we've all been fucked over by the stupidity of the society that we're embedded in, and our possibly well-meaning but hopelessly incompetent parenting and so on and so forth. So we're all the walking wounded, we're all nuts, and that ain't liable to change soon. So when you get that, that's the case. Not only is it the case, but it's not actually a problem. It's just how it is. So, but when you get that everyone is stone bonkers, I mean, like, I'm not talking a little off, I'm talking like lock them up, crazy. Everyone, me too, everyone, the human personality by definition is psychotic. And so things start to make a lot more sense, both in here and out there. Because, well, gosh, I'm being jerked around It's like, well, of course I'm a crazy person. It would be a miracle if I wasn't, you know. And all these people are just totally nuts. Well, of course they are. They're crazy people. And so, seeing the truth of that, realizing the actuality of that, goes a long way to take the pressure off, and that lets things make sense of the fact that they don't make sense, of the fact that, you know, we're basically operating on all sorts of levels that have nothing to do with each other. And of course, the crazy personality is off totally psychotic somewhere doing some crazy bullshit that has nothing to do with anything. So it's no surprise that that's the case. But that doesn't need to get in the way of anything else. That doesn't need to get in the way of, like you observed, you know, joy or appreciation or enjoyment. So you can be ranting and raving and completely freaked out about something, and at the same time really just kind of getting on with your life and having fun, you know. Doesn't need to get in the way, because it's just part of the scenery, you know. It's just part of what comes with, you know. Again, you know, a lot of the human struggle is the idea that we're supposed to fix something, that we're supposed to, you know, solve some problem, that we're supposed to be okay, that we're supposed to sort something out, that we're supposed to achieve something, that we're supposed to succeed, you know, which is just the most blatant bullshit. You know, it just can't happen. We're too dysfunctional to do that. You know, we're I mean, just look around you. You know, society is very rapidly and efficiently exterminating itself, and we're doing a really good job of it because we're crazy people. And because we're crazy people, there's no surprise, right? But it's also no problem, because hey, nothing wrong with extermination, nothing wrong with death. Everything dies. It's going to happen sooner or later, so why not just do it in one big hurrah? Take out the whole biosphere with us. Have a big bash, right? But that's just the background. That's just the window dressing. That just comes with, and it's not. It's just part of, you just work around it, because even though that's there, even though that's happening, that's happening where it's happening, and everywhere else it's all of this. You know, there's a crazy person in my head, but there's light in my field of vision. There's sound in my field of hearing. There's this texture in my field of sensation, and just whatever. I mean, all these amazing vibes and qualities and beauty and just astoundingness and weirdness and unresolvability. And, you know, it's quite a show. But it's a very multi ring circus, and just because one of them has a crazy person in it that happens to be you, is not actually an issue.
Can we talk about intense pain for a moment?
Sure, absolutely. We've all been there.
Yeah. I had a procedure done that caused me unbelievable amount of pain. It didn't last very long, but I was completely just awareness from awareness. It was just, you know. But hours later, I was able to include, you know, being in well, the conclusion being, you know, like, you know, I was hearing sounds and feeling all sorts of sensations in my body, and I was able to include it, and then it kind of like dispersed, and it was no longer so, you know, intense and contraction. But in that moment, in the moment of the most intense pain, my instant reaction was to make it stop.
Right.
Like there's nothing. Complete powerlessness, like
right.
Just complete.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought occurred to me, you know, that I have no fear of death. But this pain, it just completely took me for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Yeah. Well, intense pain is really interesting. By all means, when you have intense pain, try and get out of it. But if you can't get out of it, why fight with it?
No, okay.
It's like intense pain is a lot like bright light. It's like looking into the sun. You know, it's an overload. It's like too much. And when we try and manage it, we actually magnify it. When you try and push it away, you actually magnify it. If you can push it away, by all means, try and push it away. And if you can, great. I mean, take drugs, whatever. If you can make it go away, cool. But if you can't make it go away, then continuing to try is basically throwing gasoline on the fire. So you do the opposite. You just go into it, trip on it. It's like it's extreme experience, right? It's like the meter. It's just boom. It's like way beyond 10, and that's pretty amazing. It's not fun. It's not nice. It's not. You might rather not have that. But on the other hand, it's astounding. I mean, it really is eye-opening in a lot of very immediate ways.
I was able to do that like a minute later.
Mm-hmm.
That was what you described.
Yeah.
Just completely,
Mm-hmm.
just let it go. And,
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment, it was, yeah. It was like, oh my God, there's actually something that's too much.
Yeah. Exactly. But and yet here you are, so it wasn't too much.
Yeah, that's the craziest. That's the crazy thing. I was like, well, what was that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It can look like that, can it? It can look like that. There's no limit to what it can look like. And again, by all means, try and navigate it as much as you can if you want. If there's something happening you don't want it to happen, you can figure out a way to get away from it or make it different. Have at it. But anything can happen. It can look like anything. And so on the one hand, you orient to it however you can, take it, but on the other hand, it doesn't really matter because it's going to happen and it's going to change and then sooner or later it's going to not be happening and then something else will be happening. It's like always. I mean, here you are and it's not the intense pain anymore, I assume.
Yeah.
And, so.
Yeah, but those thoughts, I mean, in that moment,
No.
there was no room for that.
Yeah,
it
sure.
was just.
But it's not about thought. It's like I was saying earlier. The point of the pain was to be there, and in being there, it was doing its complete job. Right, and you were there too. Right, and so you were doing a complete job just by being there. And so afterwards, how you orient to it and what you do, and getting away from it or going into it or whatever is irrelevant. Then that's just sort of the artfulness of your skillfulness of being able to be with your experience in various ways. Your skill is a sorceress.
Well, I've discovered that my sorcery worked 5 minutes later, but not during.
Well, okay, that's good though. That's respectable.
Yeah.
You keep working on it, right?
I have found that those are really extreme experiences of pain and hurt. Like you were describing, you can't, I found that I'm just along for the ride.
Sure.
That's all.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do from along for
Sure.
the ride.
But
A releasing.
But you're basically, absolutely, but you're basically along for the ride in everything, aren't you?
Yes.
I mean,
Exactly.
to the extent that you are, I mean, maybe you can do something if you can or not, but still in all, here you are.
But I can try and try and try to do something, and it's beyond.
Well, maybe, yeah, and maybe not. It may be beyond, may not be, and then if it is, it is, and hey, there you are. But here you are. So, like everything, it appears, it's there, it seems to be something, but even when it's seeming to be something, you don't know just what it is. I mean, what exactly is pain? I mean, pain is certainly actual when it's happening, but, when you look at what is present when there's pain present, it may be arguably a little bit easier to do when the pain's not ultra extreme, where you're just sort of blown out of the water by, fuck me, this is too much. Where it's just like an annoying enough pain that that you can kind of sort of have enough wherewithal just to look at it. It's like, okay, here's this pain and it hurts and I don't like it, but what is it that is present in my experience? And pain is really, really weird. I mean, it's kind of like a light. It's kind of like a kind of a beacon or something. But then you look at what it is. You try and really find it. Try and really see. Well, what is this that's present as pain? And it's just weird. It's weird.
It's weird and sublime in some ways.
Yeah, but which all experience is. Again, you look at any experience, and if you look at what's actually there, you discover, wow, this isn't what I thought it was. You know, at first take, you sort of look at something and you have a sense of, oh, this is just so-and-so, right? I mean, just automatically, the mind just does this. But then if you have the wherewithal to look a little closer, it's like, wait a minute, what's actually here? What's actually present in experience that is this thing? And you look at it and you will find weirdness, because weirdness is what this is made of. You know, when I call this transcendental, it's not just alluding to some philosophical something. It's literally made of weirdness. All experience is made of weirdness, and it's really explicit. If you look and see, you know, it's quite obvious that this is the case. And when you discover that, that's an interesting discovery. You know, it kind of recalibrates your sense of what's going on here.
I have been seeing this this weird present moment for some time.
Mhm.
It's just like a glimpse.
Mm-hmm.
And but lately is the frequency and the durations increase a lot. Well, it can be just a scene. It is normal scene, but it's completely wow.
Mm-hmm.
Especially outside. It's happened most of the time when I was walking. And I take a walk, and I said, wow. And by saying that the durations is starting getting longer and longer, and giving me some capability of just to look into it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Good.
so I started to understand what you say, this shining forth. It's just this shining forth.
Yeah.
And it's completely indescribable. And yet, it is just a normal thing, but it's just so fresh, and so I really can't say what it is.
Mm-hmm.
If I say when I was reading, and I take my eyes elsewhere, and just think, wow, there's just shocking this detail and the shining forth,
Yeah.
and I can't say what it is.
Yeah.
Then seconds later, and say, oh, it's my hands. Or it's just a blanket. It's just wow, like that. But the outside is even bigger, because the entirety is everything. Of course, the hand at the moment is entirety, but the outside is that entirety. But once it's getting longer, and it's it's just progressive lately. It's just so much more and more and more. And yesterday, it's almost the whole day. Whenever I walk in the office and outside the supermarket, and just indescribable.
Yeah.
And the whole energy is just completely out of whack.
Yeah.
And when I walk and look down, and the whole cement or whatever, the ground, sidewalk just jump at me.
Yeah.
And it's like uncontrollable. It's just, sometimes my energy is just freaking out. Trying to go back to normalcy. This is sidewalk. This is just the parking lot, But it is not.
Yeah.
It's just this
That's
incredible detail.
That's great. That's very good noticing. That's the yoga.
Yeah.
You just notice how astounding this is, how inconceivable this is.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's just whatever. It's just completely whatever. Whatever you see, it just. So I just feel like the fun just start to see what really is. I just felt like this is an invitation to see what this.
Yeah, no, that's
really
very
is.
good noticing. That's good. That's the yoga. That's it.
And every time when we have a retreat, we get a little sheet, and I put the sheet in my cubicle, right? And a couple of days ago, and I look at one of them, and you will say, "What is action?" And you say, "Action is catalyzed, appearing." Okay. I just felt what you say. At that time when you talk about it, I just just the words. I didn't really hear it, but just now I felt it.
Good. Very, very good. Excellent.
But the thought still comes in, but since the duration is longer and the thought kind of diminished a
Yeah.
lot. It just keep seeing this.
Sure.
Wow.
Sure.
Wow. And like because I was walking, this happened most happened walking. And like every step is walking into a new world, completely new.
Yep.
New.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Good. Very good noticing. Mm. I mean, this is astounding in any way. This is absolutely beyond mind-bogglingly astounding, and the whole point is just notice that. You know, everything, anything is just completely mind-bogglingly astounding. How could this be? How can this be? You know, and you look at that and you say, "Gosh, there's no answer to that question. How could this be happening? What is this that's happening here? How can this be happening?" And yet it is. It's real. What's here is real, but it's absolutely inconceivable. Yeah.
I'm wondering how deep dreamless sleep fits into what you're talking about. During the day, there's an active noticing. It's like wow, or you're noticing one thing or another. It would seem that in deep dreamless sleep, there's nothing. And you could say, well, you're noticing deep nothing, but that awareness seems to be lacking, at least when we think about it like right now, what happened last night. So indeed, is that awareness always there and it's a matter of forgetting?
No,
not remembering?
it's not even a matter of forgetting. The actual awareness, the important awareness, is always present. It doesn't come and go. The awareness which is the awareness that we would more typically call being or existence, which actually consists of awareness, like I was talking about originally, the inherent intelligence, through which this is present, is always the case, and of course that's the case in deep sleep too. But it's very subtle, and when we're used to identifying with a conscious intelligence, let's call it, then that seems to be lacking in deep sleep, and so we think of ourselves as being not there, but it's because, again, it's through identifying with the conscious intelligence as being awareness, as being noticing. But again, the true noticing is discovering the omnipresent, ongoing noticing of the engagement of nowness. And nowness exists in deep sleep. Then it exists, it's still exactly the same active engagement. It doesn't look like much, let's say. But like I said, this can look like anything. But it never departs from itself. In other words, what is occurring in deep sleep is exactly the same thing that's occurring right now, exactly the same thing that's occurring in a dream state, and you will find out, I declare, is exactly what it will be experiencing after you die. But what it looks like can be absolutely anything. Like obviously now it looks like this. In deep sleep it looks like whatever it looks like there. But it's actually the same condition, presenting in drastically different, apparent modes. And again, so the essence of this yoga, the essence of what I'm trying to convey, is to explore and come to appreciate this more primal awareness or primal intelligence that is just, it kind of feels just like nowness, that through which presence of the present moment is being engaged with. It feels like almost automatically. Within which, it's like the carrier wave of awareness, within which sort of more conscious awareness that we're used to identifying with as like, oh, I'm thinking of this, or I'm noticing that, or I'm not noticing that, whatever, is like a harmonic of that fundamental awareness. And the fundamental awareness is like the awareness through which nowness is present, through which and within which all functionality occurs, within which your body is growing, within which light is shining, within which all of the so-called objective events are happening and are occurring within the engagement of this primal intelligence of call it an intelligence of presence or intelligence of experiential engagement or something. I mean, we don't have words for it because obviously it's not conscious in the sense we're used to talking about conscious awareness, like what I'm thinking about or what I'm paying attention to and all that sort of thing. But in actual fact, the conscious awareness and the awareness that we're more familiar with on a human level is a harmonic of this fundamental intelligence, and in fact a lesser harmonic. The fundamental intelligence is not less than, is in fact far more than the harmonic that we're used to identify with as our conscious intelligence. So it's really a matter of recalibrating our sense, or sense. That's a good way to put it. Our sense of what awareness is, of what intelligence is. To put it in sort of pop psychological terms, it's a matter of not identifying so strongly with the conscious mind and its modes, and learning to identify more with the unconscious modes, which is typically where this level of intelligence, of awareness actually subsists. And typically we don't notice it, we have disidentified with it because of our over-identification with our conscious modes, which is, the apparent rift between the so-called conscious and unconscious. The unconscious isn't actually unconscious, we're just not paying attention to it because it's too weird. There doesn't seem to be much going on there that we can talk about. But that weirdness is, of course, actual. And this is all about waking up to that, or letting ourselves notice that very weird, nonlinear aspect of our experience, which is in fact completely present and completely available, and which we, of course, also are. What is this? About 11:45. We'll be having lunch before in about 10 minutes or something. So, if you're good, if you all are good for that, well. As we say here, just I recommend just feel the presence of experience. Just feel the presence of experience, and how is it? Just feel how is this present? How is this being perceived? Just feel the way in which this is an absolutely automatic, absolutely intimate and inherent engagement. Like the full detail of your field of vision is instantaneously present, without needing to pay attention, without needing to consciously notice this, that, and the other. It's just bang, it's all here. The full spectrum of your field of hearing is just bang, it's present. Everything is just instantaneously present. And notice how this is actually not just an inert event, but actually a profound and spontaneous engagement. And so just sort of play with that, just sort of feel that.
I found that mental energy is the same way. I mean,
Absolutely.
Even if not thinking going mental, it's still just gushing, just like sights coming in.
Every dimension, call it, or aspect of the field of experience is always completely full. Whether it's being consciously identified as having events happen within it or not. You could say, gosh, I'm not hearing anything now, but in fact, you are. The field of hearing is completely full. You can say, gosh, I'm not seeing anything. You can close your eyes and say, I'm not seeing anything, but that's not true. Your field of vision is completely full. It may be full of subtler qualities relative to certain other qualities, or, arbitrarily, but in actual fact, it's just different degrees of whatever, different degrees of amplitude or obviousness or whatever. Yeah, everything's always full. I mean, the interesting thing about thought is the presence of thought, not the content. But this applies across the board. The interesting thing about vision is the presence of light, not what seems to be present as this or that or the other, but the fact that light is present in experience. That's the powerful fact.
Shift, I think, is taking place for me in noticing, which I really like that as a word instead of like seeing or looking at something that's so active that it just sounds like it's a casual thing. And like its subtleties are showing up, just softness and shadows and changes of light that has always been there. Like when I walked into a big room with a lot of people talking last week, I was amazed. I actually heard all these people talking. I mean, I walked in there constantly, and it's a buzz, but I haven't like heard it. And same thing with like light and distortion and patterns and stuff. And one thing that's different from the past is sort of like what Don Juan called his mercantile mind. It's like wanting to explode it. How could I turn something like that into art? When it's self-present, it's like it's everything already.
Right. Yeah, it's really, it's almost like there's two strata of experience. One is the strata of the presence of experience and experiential qualities as a fullness, and then the other layer is a sort of a human or personalized approach to that of, well, what does this mean to me? What can I do with it? What am I doing here? As a general, there's a slight bias of interpreting it or exploiting it or defining it, as opposed to just the fact that, well, here it is. In itself, what is it in itself? Not what is it to me, but just what is it in its presence. And of course, in actuality, these two modes are not opposites. They aren't antagonistic at all. They're concurrent. Typically, as people, we're used to identifying with the one mode and you're completely ignoring, being oblivious to the other mode. Well, Jeff, would you tell Leif I'll get my own lunch? If you would, thank you. My aerobics for the day. As you can see, I'm an avid physical culturist.
Takes a lot of calories to digest food.
I know, right?
Probably I got from what we were saying there when you were talking about the everyday human mode, what it wants to do, what it sees. It's like a word like also. Everything's like also. It's all inclusive. And I want to go to the good space. I want to go to the holy space, the spiritual space. And yet, the space that I would think of leaving to go there is also.
Right. Yeah. Again, it's a matter of not this. In spirituality and in humanity in general, we're very accustomed to this kind of gamesmanship of, where's the winning part of the game? Where do I want to go that's better? What am I getting from going to that's going to be a gain, or that's going to be winning, or that's going to be going to the good stuff? And in spirituality, it's what's liberating, what's enlightening, what is more open or more realized or more whatever, however you define that. But again, of course, that is not actually like that. That's not what it's about at all. It's about discovering what this is across the board. which of course implies that where you're starting from is it too, just as much as where you fantasize about going to, or where you actually seem to be going to, even, you know. It's just a change. It's not actually a gain or a betterment. An oak tree is not better than an acorn. An oak tree has not gained anything by growing from an acorn. An acorn is what an oak tree looks like when it looks like an acorn, and an oak tree is what an acorn looks like when it looks like an oak tree. And likewise, you know, an ignorant, stupid human being is what a realized being looks like when it looks like that, and vice versa. It's just different degrees, different phases of maturity. It's not actually a gain or improvement or a solution of some problem. You know, we don't look at kindergartners and criticize them for their stupidity and their incompetence and their incapability. You know, we don't criticize babies for shitting in their pants. Or for that matter, old people for shitting in their pants. Getting a little closer to that into things myself. It's just like, hey, it's quite appropriate when you're in that phase. That's the kind of functioning that shows up, and hey, so it's cool. It's not an improvement. It's just a different phase showing up with a different kind of quality of expression in a different phase of the arc of maturing. You know, but I call this the yoga of radiant presence, and that consists merely of feel, or let's say notice that you are inherently feeling the presence of your experience. And with that, inclusively, spontaneously, comes with all of these qualities that it seems to present as, in all their dynamism and all their unresolvability and all their ongoing nature. And that's the whole shooting match right there. Right? That's what we've got. And just really notice how intimately you already are, by virtue of what you happen to be. Notice how intimately you already are engaged in this. It's not like something you need to do or not do. It's just, you can't help. It's what you are. You are this incredible experiencing intelligence. You know, it's what you're made of. It's what you happen to be. And you can't not be that. There's no off switch, you know. And simply notice that fact. And there's all the other stuff. There's all our human stuff and the stuff we're usually so obsessed with. But just, you know, devote a certain amount of time to noticing this fact, which is really non-human or pre-human or post-human or transhuman, but just the fact of the presence of experience, the actuality of the experiential field as an active engagement, which it inherently is, an active engagement of inconceivable intelligence. And just notice that is the fact. And it's easy to notice it because you are noticing it. You are it. You're doing it. It's not like it's something over there that's mysterious that you need to somehow train yourself to get to. On the contrary, it's you couldn't be more intimately in it. Your nose is like pressed to the glass, so to speak. And so it's just like, oh yeah, gosh, this experience is here, and I'm like completely with it. Just you know, I can't not be. And a fun way to play with that, an interesting experiment, is try to not experience. Just try to stop it. You know, nothing happens, does it? Okay, try to experience more. Try to turn up your Nothing happens, does it? It's just this this absolute steady state presence, this absolute steady state. And it's a presence that is completely perceived, right? It's not just an inert presence, it's a presence of perception, a presence of engagement. And it's not something you need to do or cannot do, it's the case, it's what you are, it's what's happening here. And so simply noticing that fact is discovering what this is, what you are, on a more primal level perhaps than we're used to noticing. And there's implications that come with that. They're irrational, you can't verbalize them, but there's an incredible amount of wisdom and intuitional perspective that is revealed in the noticing this perspective on what we are, on what this event is. Successfully noticing it sort of spontaneously recalibrates your whole sense of your worldview, of what you are and what's going on here, without effortlessly and without much rational content. The feeling of what it is and the feeling of what you are just changes. And with that can come different functionalities and different orientations. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is that it's real, it's true, it's what's really going on. So why not include that? Why spend all our time living in this exaggerated, neurotic, partial take on things that people usually do? Well, welcome back. We're on the home stretch.
All right.
Let's see, it's about 1:45. We have to knock off at about 2:30 to make our flight, so we have plenty of time to get into the thick of it. I'd like to start off talking about one issue that is really central to the challenge of spirituality and the problems of genuine engagement in yoga, well, as I call it yoga, as you know. I call it yoga to differentiate that it's actual experiential engagement as opposed to philosophizing or thinking about things or posturing. It's about it's about being with your experience. And one of the issues of that is mostly problematic for people, ongoingly again and again, and it's such a subtle issue that it is pretty much a challenge across the board, is the unresolvability of things. You can't actually find anything. You go looking for something, try and be with awareness. Okay, where's awareness? You can't find it. So what? Try to be, with anything. I talk about, this morning I started talking about, well, this is intelligent, which is engagement experience. Okay, but try to find this engagement with experience, You go looking for it and it's like, it's right here somewhere, And what we tend to do, of course, is think we kind of found something that kind of might be it, and then we sort of resolve that. But all this resolution occurs in imagination, because experientially nothing is resolvable. You can never tell what anything is. You can never actually resolve anything into precisely being exactly anything. Experience is very, very strange and mercurial and slippery, where everything is so obvious until you go looking for it, and then you go looking for it, and it's like, what is it? What is it? And this is an ongoing challenge. So a large part of this yoga, a large part of becoming a more mature spiritual engager is learning to be comfortable with ambiguity, learning to be comfortable with indeterminacy, learning to be comfortable with the lack of resolution in experience. Because experience is a very, very strange thing. It does not resolve. Every aspect of it does not resolve. Nothing resolves. You can never get to the bottom of what anything is. or for that matter, isn't. And so this can, of course, be very frustrating or stymieing. You think, well, gosh, I haven't got it because I haven't got to the bottom of it. But in actual fact, not getting to the bottom of it is getting to the bottom of it. The bottom of it is that there is no bottom. The bottom of it is that it's unfindable. And this is true, it's, as strange as it may sound, this is true across the board of all actuality. Everything is exactly what it is, but you'll never find it. You'll never pin it down. You'll never isolate it. You'll never define it. You'll never get, now this is it exactly. I know what it is, and you can take it and frame it and, put it on your mantelpiece or something. It's not going to happen. So, and of course it's, as humans, we're easy to, human logic, well, if something is something or it isn't something, it's this or it isn't this. It's, we all have this kind of mindset. It's just built into human logic. And this does not apply to actuality. It doesn't apply to the actuality experience, where everything is slippery, everything is ambiguous, everything is shades of gray. And that's what it is. That's not a failure or an inbuilt imprecision so you can't get to what it is. What it is that. What it is like a mirage. What it is a condition that does not actually precisely and finally and stably resolve to being this or that. Which is very strange, because it's not a kind of a condition that we're used to thinking of as human beings. It doesn't fit in with human logic. Human logic, something, a thing is either a toaster or it's not a toaster. It's light or it's dark. It's this or it's that. And actuality isn't actually like that. Actuality is, it's kind of like this, but it's not really, And all these kind of likes, but not really, and that turns out to be the final condition. That turns out to be what you find. When you find reality, you haven't found anything. And not finding anything is finding reality, because that's what reality is. Reality is not anything. It seems to be something. It seems to be a lot. It seems to be this and that and the other. But you go looking for the this, that, and the other, and it doesn't resolve. It's like, well, yeah, it's kind of like that, but then you look closer and it isn't really. And then so you go looking some more and you look and, maybe it's kind of like that. And then you go looking for that and, no, it's not, but not really, no. And so it's real easy to think you're missing it. It's real easy to think that you're not getting it, you're not there, you're screwing up, you're not finding it. But actually you are. In Dzogchen, they have many sayings that go like that. If you read some of the root Dzogchen texts, some of the really good stuff, you'll find passage after passage that says, if you look for mind and don't find it, that's finding it. Because it's not something you can find, and finding that is the case is finding what it is finding its actual condition, and so on and so forth. So artful yoga, artful spirituality, exploring the actuality of what you are, exploring the actuality of what experience is, necessitates a learning this kind of a looseness, a kind of an easiness, a kind of a comfort with ambiguity, a comfort with unresolvability and unresolvedness. And for people that are more naive or more, more sort of, let's say, earlier in their learning curve, it's real easy to misinterpret this as a failure. Or worse, and more commonly, it's really easy to sort of jump into a fantasy, to jump to an imagination of you're thinking what something is, or thinking what something is, and then go into this fantasy and think you're doing it. I mean, so many people are meditators or something, and their idea of what meditation is fantasy, and they go there and do it again and again and again. I'm meditating. And it's well intentioned, but it's a shame because there's so many dead ends that just end up with people lost in basically narcissism, or lost in engaging with their own fantasy of things. But that's the basic human condition, so it's not really a departure. And of course, engaging with fantasy is not a problem, because engaging with fantasy is 90% of the way the experiential reality presents itself. as we all know. You know, that's not a bad thing. That's half of the way it presents. So anyway, this is an issue that I wanted to bring up because it's a very major issue for anyone that, you know, approaches this stuff with any seriousness and really gets down to trying to look at these things. Well, what is experience? What is awareness? You know, what is these experiential qualities? What is focus of awareness? What is light? What is sound? What is thought? You know, because these questions are very, very slippery because you're never going to find a definitive answer. And yet, artfully, not finding the definitive answer is finding the definitive answer, if you do it well. If you really, really thoroughly find that you can't find the answer, if you really, really thoroughly find the unresolvability, you found what it actually is. But it's a different character of thing, a different character of condition or object than you may anticipate if you naively expect things to be things. You naively expect things to actually be something in particular. Yeah.
I'm suddenly reminded of this college joke. I existed in all possible forms of Jack until you looked at me, and now I'm reduced to just what you perceive. I hope you're satisfied.
We used to have this monthly meeting, and now we have every other month meeting. Somehow, every time during the meeting, I would say something, and it felt like that I was, you know, along the way I was improving in a progressive way,
Mm-hmm.
and internally, I find there is some kind of holding, and it seems like that I'm making, you know, there's a footsteps,
Mm-hmm.
and I might go a step further and also climbing up. But one lately, somehow I was looking back, and I find that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
None of them are true.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very typical, you know, when we're earlier, relatively speaking, in the spiritual path, we're very credulous and we believe, you know, well, I'm making progress and I'm working on this and I'm working on that, I'm working on this and I'm working on that. And then as you mature, you get to a point where you look back on all and you go, gosh, I was so crazy. I was so, you know, I was so heavy-handedly interpreting things. You know, so much of spirituality, the actual essence of spirituality is just relaxing, learning looseness, learning to be comfortable with ambiguity and be comfortable with not knowing and being comfortable with, you know, with just being loose and easy. Because the nature of what this is does not come together. It does not converge into coherence. It does not converge into, you know, getting sharper and sharper and making more and more sense and turning more and more into something. You know, it's just the other way around. The more closely you look at it, the weirder it gets. You know, and really, which is a good thing because that's the whole point of what we're exploring and trying to discover is the actual condition of this, which happens to be like that. It happens to be very weird. But again, it's a kind of a learning curve to learn to be comfortable with this weirdness and unresolvability, and to learn to be sort of loose with it and easy with it, and not so readily jump onto the mirage of turning it into this or that and then seizing on it. You know, it's very easy to concretize it erroneously. You know, and of course we all do this. We all do this when we're, you know, more naive with it, when we're earlier on in the game. But you know, as one, you know, goes around the block a few more times, chasing one's tail, after a while you sort of get, oh, it sort of penetrates our thick skins, and we kind of get, oh, I get it. I'm beginning to get it now. Yeah.
Oh, well, you've referred to that Gospel of Thomas statement. which is something like, let the seeker seek till he finds, when he finds he'll be troubled, or greatly troubled, and then he'll be astonished and will rule over the all. And so that's a intriguing, fascinating statement. And I was reading about the tarot and finding sort of a parallel to that sort of quaternary, but in my own experience too. It's not like, okay, it says it in the book, but what I was reading in the tarot is just that there's this realm of coins or pentacles is just basically all human thinking, and that labeling about things, and that there's a process, I think, of disencumberment of all these notions and a courage of free fall maybe into our experience, which I think is what you're talking about.
Sure.
And then there's a realm of swords, because it's a cutting, and that could be troubling. It's cutting through that whole world of, I'll call it illusion. And then there's cups, which is illumination. There's a poverty of spirit, and you're open for the illumination to wands, which is mystical union. And this book is referencing Plato at age 75, saying, everything I've written before doesn't apply to what I'm experiencing now. I'm not going to write about what I'm experiencing now. Thomas Aquinas, the same thing. So,
I guess I have a few years to go. So you guys ignore this now.
No, you're.
We'll meet again when I'm 75, and I'll tell you.
No, so. But that, that in the spiritual poverty, okay, I thought I knew all this. I knew all this. I thought I know all this about everything, myself, the world, everybody, and blah 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 blah. That's all this realm of coins that needs to be cut through. What I don't know anything. And then in that poverty of spirit, then there's an opportunity for this grace.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm experiencing some of this. Anyway, so I just throw that out there.
Sure. Yeah. Nice.
I find that, of course, I find I have a preference for, I think, an acquired taste for disorientation.
Well, it's nice to play to your strengths.
Yeah. That's good. I find it enjoyable. It's, like laying down next to the car and seeing things going on. I can't make sense of it, and not knowing whether, I'm just laying down, I can't tell where my feet are, if one's crossed over the other, just things where I can't tell what's going on. It's actually quite
but that's
intriguing.
And that's lovely. That that's really a high water mark of maturity, because when we're more naive, we're confused about things and we think of that as a real problem, and we're just chipping away at that and fighting it and struggling with it to try and know something, to pin something down. But then ultimately, of course, you come full circle. And that initial not knowing, that initial confusion, turns out to be a very, very intimate, engagement or revelation of what this actually is, strangely enough.
And it's a very feeling, sense, not knowing what's up and down.
Yeah,
Literally.
No, it's obvious what it is when you develop the looseness or subtlety to be with it in its own as open-endedly as it actually is. The problem is, of course, that it has a tendency. It's like a Rorschach blot. What you bring to it, what you're looking for, and you have a tendency to see. So it's so easy to project into it, and so people have all of these certainties. Oh, look, reality is this, that, the other. And because it can seem to be that way, obviously. And we all have so much familiarity with this in our lives, of course. We've known this, and we've known that, and we've known the other thing, But then when you look closer at these things, wait a minute, it's a little stranger than that. Yeah.
What you're saying seems to imply a kind of existential isolation, which instinctively, I think I back away from it fearfully. It implies a lack of connection with anybody else, ultimately, other than the assumption of common experience.
I'm not sure I follow you. What would be isolated from what? Why does what I say imply an isolation?
Because if everything that you see is only what it is now, and then now, and then now, and then now.
Mm-hmm.
There's never any way to reach out beyond what there is at the moment to connect with another person in his now, because they're never going to be the same now.
Well, but that has never stopped us before. I mean, in other words, there's no theoretical basis for saying that can't happen, because there's no real theoretical basis for saying how anything happens or doesn't happen. So there's no reason to exclude any mode of anything happening.
But it leaves out a path. It leaves out any clear way to make that happen.
Maybe, but not necessarily. I mean, I don't see that is implicit in that. Because again, nothing is excluded. Unresolvability actually implies a kind of inclusive. Since you can't say what it is, you can't say what it ain't. So have at it. You know, anything, you can pull anything off because there's no theoretical reason why you can't.
So
maybe.
Yeah. Okay. I still find it a little frightening, and it seems to me it takes some courage to jump off that cliff to say, you know,
I
I'm
understand
gonna be
that.
here now.
I understand that. And this is very typical. Most people are, we're very used to having a frame of reference, and it's very common to interpret these as safe, as secure, as practical, as pragmatic, and the idea of sort of, well, gosh, if anything goes, then what? Can be a little, whoops, wait a minute, hold the phone.
Yes.
I understand that, but it's not necessarily the case that that's so. And more to the point, if that is the actual condition, if that is what is really occurring here, then the fact that that's the reality makes it more powerful, more useful, more clear, more accurate than an approximation of it that is being held to be more certain, that is less accurate.
Better to know.
Yeah, exactly so. And I think experientially, most people, I would argue, most people who have, let's call it successfully discovered the truth of what this is very profoundly, and discovered this open-endedness and this strangeness, it actually turns out to be kind of a nice thing. It actually turns out to be a positive condition and a most useful condition, and a very a generous condition that allows all sorts of multiple functionalities, which is, if anything, an increase rather than a decrease relative to a more contained or constrained
Yes. Is that
perspective.
in your experience?
Definitely. But I understand that, when we're used to a certain kind of conservatism or caution, where we're sort of relating to things within some degree of structure or what have you, the notion of, gosh, you want me to jump off this cliff? You want me to jump off this boat? Can seem a little, wait a minute, can seem a little threatening. And it is threatening to that structure. But then the question becomes, but is that actually a good thing or a bad thing? And again, that's difficult to assess until after the fact. So it is a bit of a challenge. Certainly.
I suppose one can always say, no, I don't like reality. I'm going to go back into my head.
Well, I think many people do. And this is interesting, that you bring this up, because I think ongoingly this is everyone's experience. I think everyone all the time is experiencing naked reality continually in their experience. But again, typically we don't appreciate it or value it as such. We're just like, oh boy, I really spaced out then, or gosh, where was I then? Let me pull myself back together. Let me focus, or something like this. And we may interpret these things as lapses or spacing this out, or what have you. Some degree of losing it in some sense. Whereas in actuality, these things are interpreted as failings or as losses because of not appreciating the positivity of what that is and the actuality of what that is. And again, it's a matter of whether you're approaching things within more call it a stable frame of reference, or a more fluid, multivalent, and open-ended thing. But my ultimate argument is what is most actual, what is most the case, is most valuable. In other words, what's real wins by virtue of that fact. So a reality that turns out to have downsides is preferable to a delusion that has upsides, because the delusion is going to lose in the end. Reality wins. Reality trumps, And so, but again, like I say, my argument, and I invite you to play with this, is you may find that in actuality this kind of a more open-ended, free-fallish approach has enormous upsides, enormous pluses. And also, it's not all or nothing. At first, when we're looking at this, it looks like kind of, gosh, you want me to jump off this cliff? What am I going to do then? But it's not really like that. You can explore being outside of a frame of reference and return to the frame of reference, because again, we do this all the time, experientially, in actual fact. You go to sleep at night and your frame of reference is out the window, and you wake up and whoop, there it is again, if you want. But when you're awake too, you can also play with being outside your frame of reference. You can play with just sort of spacing out into the sky, or looking at clouds, or just listening to some sound and just letting go. Just explore it, and without, it doesn't necessarily involve an all or nothing, life or death kind of a commitment. So you can explore for yourself, sort of do desensitization therapy, to sort of familiarize yourself with playing with these kinds of referenceless experiences, and see, gosh, maybe you'll find it's not so bad, and actually kind of a plus in some ways. But anyway.
Sometimes it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I've found that as assumptions and frames of reference fall away, then it's sort of a fearlessness comes in, and so what's a consequence? If you let go of a whole bunch of assumptions, then what is one risking in doing something differently than how one has done something? And I mean, what's good and what's bad? It's like
Sure.
you can't find good and you can't find bad.
Mm-hmm.
So you have an experiment, and so that's that story that went around the internet for a long time ago. The man and his son and his horse, and they keep switching from good to bad, and bad. What appears to be good is bad in the story, and then the bad thing that happens turns out to be a good thing, and it just keeps. But it's a really good story because it does. That's what I can't say in a given moment of an experience that I don't like right now isn't going to be part of something really wonderful. And
well, ultimately, since everything is part of everything else, anything that happens is doing everything else. So everything that follows on it that is a plus is a good outcome, and everything that follows on it is a negative is a bad outcome. But each of those also embedded in everything lead to other goods and bads. So it's like you throw a pebble in the pond, the ripples go every direction.
Exactly. You can't actually find
causality is not simple and or linear or sequential.
There's cause and effect, but you can't find it because there's no one cause for every effect, and you can't even find you look at the effect and you can't find that either. So, so then, the idea of risk becomes, just a somewhat empty concept.
But again, one comes to these different ways of being with one's functioning experientially. When you play with referencelessness to a certain degree, then your perspective on things will shift and adjust itself, and you come for yourself to these perspectives, to these ways of seeing it.
Yeah,
Theory is beside the point.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, to see, like just in experience, seeing where I see where I really do believe something, and it's like, oh, isn't that interesting? I really do believe whatever it is, and it doesn't matter. But there's something that when in the seeing, when I see one of those things where I really am caught, that's also its own liberation.
I mean, ultimately, everything is a revelation of what experience can look like. So being caught up in one's own tangled web that can happen. Yeah, it can look like that. Having clear revelations and amazing insights, that can happen. Yeah, it can look like that. So all of these are just ways of triangulating on different aspects of the way this can seem to present itself. Yeah. Again, what tangles it up and makes it confusing is starting to assign value judgments to it and saying, "Oh, this is good. This is bad. This is the problem. This is the solution." Then we're just hopelessly complicating something that we don't really have authority to.
On the other hand, the mind enjoys solving a problem.
Well, endlessly, and it will spin it out. The mind ain't going to stop running amok anytime soon, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Or maybe no.
Maybe so. I wouldn't hold my breath if I was you. But hey, you never know, right?
There are two different approaches happen. One is look into the thought. Whenever that occurs, and just see it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. It is empty. That's one approach. Another one is just to directly see what, boom, this, and completely bypass the thinking process. Mm-hmm. The thinking might appear, but just a very tiny portion of it. Those two things happens in those two approaches. It's not, I don't really practice anything. It's just, it occurs. Mm-hmm. Whenever it happens, look into the thought, when thought occurs, and look into it very efficiently, very significantly. That's it. Or go into the direct seeing. Mm-hmm. It also happens spontaneously. Mm-hmm. The looking into the thought is composite, transformative approach. Mm-hmm. Right? And looking into the reality directly is.
They're actually the same thing. The difference is the time lag.
The time?
Time lag. So you can look at in fact you can look at all yoga, at all spiritual engagement with experience in terms of the time lag, which is the degree to which you get swept along by things before you look back at it. And basically, as one progresses in one's skillfulness, the time lag gets shorter and shorter and shorter until it becomes non-existent, and then you just always just this moment. There's no recursiveness of losing this moment and then remembering to look at it and then seeing it, where it's a kind of a cyclic approach. But that cycle can get shorter and shorter and shorter until there's no gap, and you're just with experience in real time, continually, ongoingly, without this kind of a sort of almost a hypnotic cycle of getting distracted and forgetting, and then remembering to look and seeing through it. So they're ultimately the same thing, just with a less of a time lag.
It happens on itself, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
It spontaneously happens as one's yoga develops, as one develops as a yogi. And the way in which that happens can't be said, but the way in which anything happens can't be said, so that's not surprising.
Yeah, if I'm trying to do the practice, look into the thought, that's not gonna work. Yeah, I just generate more thought. You're starting mindfully analyzing your thought.
Yeah.
Or the cosmic says no.
Let me think about thinking.
It doesn't work.
Let me think about thinking about thinking. I forgot what was I thinking about? Which thing? But as I began talking about today, the actual event, the high water mark of spirituality, what all this is in actuality just this instantaneous, real-time fact of the apparition of your experience, which is, as I said, it's not just an inert event or an objective event. It's an event of a profound engagement of an inherent intelligence which your consciousness consists of with itself, ultimately with this amazing experiential phenomenon that are appearing as the full field of your experience. And, it's really, and all of this yoga is about discovering that this is the primal event and this is in actuality the total event. And all of our normal human perspective of abstraction and identifying with our conscious mind and identifying with our thoughts and so on and so forth is an abstraction out of, or let's say an abstraction within this fundamental event without ever actually departing from it. So, it's like calling a spade, getting to be with the event as it actually is just this presence of actuality, this presence of the experiential field in real time, of course, which is the sole thing that's happening. And everything else, so-called, is actually just harmonics of that happening in that as an artifact of that. So it's possible to actually be with that event as you are already. You can't not be with this event. It's possible to be with that event as it is directly, call it consciously, or notice that you are, which is the same thing, because of course, as I said, you already are intrinsically. You're with your experience. Experience is present. That means you're with it. Or how else would you be experiencing it, right? And so just to notice how direct and unmediated and how profound an engagement of intelligence that is, just by the fact of what it is the goal of spirituality. This is the goal of what all of this stuff is about. Just that simple discovery of this actuality, and that you are that you are doing this in inconceivable, inhuman feat. And so all of any looking at experience ultimately tends to lead towards the discovery of experiencing itself, which of course is not the result of an analysis or the result of thought or the result of figuring it out. It's on the contrary, noticing something that is an irrational, indescribable, and a completely actual and obvious fact.
One of the things that I have a hard time reconciling is whenever you talk about this stuff, this is what you talk about. It's just like, and I kind of.
I'm a little boring, aren't I?
No, when I do it, it's like sticking my finger in a fucking socket. It's like, and I don't know how you can be so damn normal with all this stuff. I mean, it's just like, I sometimes just gonna shake my head. It's like, you're talking from it. I know you're talking from it.
It's just exposure.
So.
I did my going crazy freaking out about it years and years and years ago. After a while, going, wow, fucking wow. After doing that for a few years, you kind of get tired and you go like, what's on TV? Wow, what's on TV? Wow.
Good to know.
I mean, this is something, actually, we've talked about this many times, and I have talked about this, in these meetings often. Things seem to be spectacular by contrast. When you discover something new, it's like, wow, but the wow factor, it doesn't come so much from what it is, but by how much it deviates from what you're used to. It's like the newness or the difference that makes it seem like, whoa! But if that becomes normal, after a while, there's no difference, there's no deviation, and all of a sudden, this is just the new normal. And you'll find that this is the case. And if you look back at your own experience, this is the case. If you look at, you're functioning at one level, and then you discover some whole new facet of your functioning, and at first there's a major wow factor, and after a while, it's like, okay, yeah, that's there. And if you stop to think about it and remember, and say, yeah, that's pretty amazing. But if you're not thinking about it, it's just, okay, well, here we are, I mean, what this is truly spectacular, and it's possible to live with the constant awareness of that fact. But again, the wow factor is more in the revelation, and after this, the ongoing presence of that fact is a continual revelation. But again, there's no contrast, so it's just it's unfucking believable. It's beyond the beyond. It's the miracle of miracles. It's the literal presence of the transcendental divine. What that has always meant in all the holy men and all the religions and Buddha and Ramana Maharshi and Jesus Christ and everybody, this is what they were all talking about exactly. And like, yeah, okay, that's how it is.
What else is new?
Yeah, but yeah, and there is nothing else new. And it is it is worth all of the hyperbole and all the hoopla. But it's also just the common fact. It is also just what this happens to be, and has always been and always will be. And it's possible to notice that and discover that fact. And accommodating to that fact as it is, you'll be oriented to what you actually are, as opposed to some totally erroneous version of what you actually are, which, as we all know, causes problems.
But it is always new.
Of course. But it's not new that it's always new. It has always been new. That is the eternal condition, that it is always new.
Kohan new again.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Is there any technique or approach that you would suggest that would help reduce the cycle time?
Yes. Be subtle in noticing your experience and exploring it. And when I say noticing it, I mean not as a procedure or as a practice or as a formality, but simply, notice particular experiencing. Like if you're seeing something, notice the fact of seeing, and just look at what it is. And don't look at it by thinking about it. Don't look at it analytically. Look at it by feeling it. Look at it the way you would listen to a fine piece of music. You explore it intimately. You feel it intimately. And there's a lot of richness there in that feeling of it. But you're not distanced from it. You're not analytically necessarily thinking of it, at a distance. You're immersed in it. And so, you explore your experience sort of textually and immersively. And in the process of this, what you're doing is sensitizing yourself and educating yourself in a kind of an irrational, nonverbal, illogical intelligence, which of course you have and are. And so you're basically retraining yourself to function with your own pre-logical intelligence, with your primal intelligence, which happens to be your root intelligence, and also much more powerful than your rational intelligence, which is an abstraction, which is sort of a lesser harmonic of that, you might say, or a derivation of that. And we're cut off from this more primal intelligence, not because we were actually cut off from it. In actual fact, we are it all the time and are using it all the time, but because we're so used to psychologically identifying with our conscious minds and that whole mode of intelligence, that we don't recognize we sort of schizophrenically or sort of identifying with this mode of intelligence and ignoring this other mode of intelligence that we are in fact using all the time. But we ignore it because it's so different. It's pre-verbal, it's irrational, it's very, sort of, you might say, more right brain. I mean, there's a lot of ways to qualify it, none of which would be accurate. So you're retraining yourself to be with this primal intelligence of direct engagement. And the way to do it is just through direct engagement with experience. And letting yourself take a particular experience when you're in the mood, let yourself look at the light hitting a leaf outside your window. Just feel it for a few minutes. And after a while, you'll find yourself drifting off and going into abstraction or whatever. And that's fine, just let it go. Be very lucid, easy, and gentle with it. And then at some point, a few minutes or hours or days later, you'll find yourself doing the same thing. And at that point, do the same, just engage, be with it. And again, when you find yourself drifting off, just let go. And that's the cycle of just doing that. And every time you do that, you will do it better, you will do it deeper, because you're kind of retraining yourself to be able to be consciously with this primal intelligence, which we're used to not being with consciously. In a way, in sort of pop psychological terms, it's training yourself to consciously enter the unconscious mind. And I'm not at all psychologically trained, so that's all bullshit. But I mean, just sort of in terms of euphemistically speaking, you're going to a very irrational portion of the mentality, a portion of the mentality that ordinarily we don't acknowledge from our conscious mind, because it doesn't compute in those terms. Unless you're an artist or a person who is already more heavily engaged in that sort of mode of being with your experience. But your average person is probably less so these days, because our culture doesn't emphasize it.
Would you say one of the ways to describe that behavior that we don't notice is that because it comes with?
Yeah. It's inherent.
Yeah.
I use this word inherent. That's another way of saying the same thing. It's so ubiquitous and so constant, we don't notice it as anything. I mean, typically, and this is like what I was talking about when I started talking today, our experience is present, and so we typically, I suppose, take that as just a given fact. Well, of course experience is here. But we don't notice that in actuality the presence of experience is something that's being very actively done. It's an active and immediate actual engagement of perceiving intelligence with an inconceivable quantity of absolutely dynamic living information.
Well, I first noticed that was, I caught myself turning my head in response to something, and I thought, I'm not consciously doing that.
No, of
That's
course not.
being pulled toward that.
Of course.
It's one with the action.
Yeah, or a heartbeat, or a breathing, or walking. I mean, when you walk, you don't know. There's no way you could describe how you're walking, right, and yet you can effortlessly do it. How does this happen? How does this functionality happen? And in actual fact, all of our functionality happens like that. And we may or may not have a pretend conscious participation of, oh, I'm doing this and I'm thinking about it. But in actual fact, that's not really the case.
Yes.
An example you've probably heard me give many times, because I say it all the time. The conscious mind's pretension of functioning is like one of those children's car seats that's sitting, you put it next to the driver and it's got a steering wheel and a horn. The steering wheel's not connected to anything. But the kid's going along, I'm driving. The conscious mind's like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to do that. But our actual functioning is always by direct energy engagement, let's call it, which is what I'm talking about with this very primal engagement with experience. And we don't typically acknowledge it because of these quirks with our psychology, where we have this identifying with this very bizarre, abstracting, self-image, conscious mind thing, which is, big can of worms. Yeah.
talk more about the narcissism that can sometimes result from, early seekers?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is, in a certain sense, narcissism is the fundamental spiritual problem. And I don't mean that it's easy to take that the wrong way. What I mean by that is that, what I would argue is sort of a normal human framework is one of it's a very self-absorbed human framework where we think of ourselves as really important and our life is really important and everything really matters and we're striving for this and trying for that and it's all very important and urgent, which is, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but this is human normalcy and we're all very familiar with it. But in actual fact, that whole mindset runs counter to spirituality because spirituality is discovering what is objectively important, not what is subjectively important. I mean, at first it turns out, at first it looks like that. Ultimately, of course, the two resolve. What is subjective and what is objective turn out to be the same condition, but it doesn't seem like that at first. So what is happening with that box of Kleenex? What is happening with the floor is in actuality just exactly as important as what's happening with my emotions or with my mind, because they're actually aspects of the same phenomenon. But from the normal human viewpoint, I'm not used to thinking that way. I'm used to thinking, no, the Kleenex has nothing to do with me, the floor has nothing to do with me, I matter. What's happening to my mind and my emotions is what's important. It's the Peter show, and here's the star of the show. I mean, obviously not in such an absurd way most of the time for most of us, but it amounts to that kind of a thing, but the problem of that is that we're cutting ourselves off from the part of our consciousness which is in actual fact very much engaged with everything that would from that mindset be classified as impersonal. So we're splitting ourselves in two. We're cutting one system into two. In terms of how we're approaching it, which is unrealistic and confusing, because it's not actually like that. So it creates an unreality. So this is all about discovering the actual condition, discovering the single condition which accounts for the presence of reality, the presence of the experiential field, which includes everything we're used to thinking of as subjectivity, also includes everything we're used to thinking of as objectivity, which turn out to be one and the same thing. And so that's the great discovery in spirituality. But it can seem, especially at first, to be very much counter to our natural mindset, of which we're here we're qualifying as being narcissistic, because of the, we think of our personal drama as sort of what matters, or what's important.
So if the subjective is the same as the objective, does that imply that we're creating our reality, or that the reality exists and we automatically perceive it as it is?
Both. They're one and the same. The two ways of saying the same thing. There's one system whose functioning accounts for all this that you may qualify as subjective or objective, but that qualification is artificial because it's actually one system that accounts for all that range of phenomena. So in actuality, what's making the sun shine and making your heart beat is also making the thoughts present in your head and the emotions present and so on and so forth. So it's all one, it's all just aspects, different sort of, we call it different readouts of one system, or different ranges of apparition. There's different symptoms of the functioning of one system, basically.
You spoke in terms of a field. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. One sort of a very simple and obvious way of indicating what reality consists of is the experiential field. So your experiential field is all that exists, as far as you know. You can't find anything outside it, because anything you find that's outside it is actually appearing within it, or you wouldn't know it's there. So this is just empirical. So it's a way of, it gives a verbal tag that indicates pretty accurately this context. And if you look at the experiential field, you of course discover all phenomena usually qualify as objective, and you also discover all phenomena usually qualify as subjective, because your thoughts appear in the experiential field as much as that bush outside the windows appear in the experiential field. So again, it kind of, as a label, as a sort of a designated object, it's kind of a nice unifying image.
So it's kind of a unified field theory. Or maybe a non-unified field
Well, it's
theory.
unified, but the way in which it's unified has an inherent divergence, which is very strange and befuddling to our rational intelligence. It's like, and the whole thing is kind of interesting from the philosophical point of view. The fantasy of science and logic is that reality is convergent. In other words, the more you study a phenomena, the more precisely you will come to what it is. And it turns out that things are exactly the opposite. Things are divergent. Where the more you study a phenomena, the more facets of it you find out that are actually unresolvable with each other. And the more you study those sub-facets, they spread out into even more facets that are unresolvable. So you start with something that has some degree of coherence, and you end up with less coherence the more you study it, which is very strange from the logical point of view. But if you look at your experience, you'll discover very readily that this is the case. And we all know this is the case. The better you get to know someone, the more complex and subtle they turn out to be. The longer you know someone, they don't converge to simplicity. On the contrary, they open up. And the same with anything. Anything, the more experience you have of something, the more subtle and complex and rich it reveals itself to be.
That's why those physicists are all nuts.
Well, yeah, materialist science is doomed because they keep coming up with these wonderful theories which are elaborate and valuable, but none of them are final. And it's always going to be, the final theory is never going to be said because this is unresolvable.
It makes it a fun game.
Well, it's totally fun. It's very absorbing, as anyone knows that follows it with relish. We have to knock off in about 45 minutes. We can take a 5-minute break if people need to use the bathroom or just stretch your legs or something. I know it can be numbing sitting in a talk like this for hours and hours listening to me drone on. So why don't we just take a 5-minute stretching break? And try and keep it to just really 5 minutes, and that way we can get in another 45 minutes before we have to take off.
I still have them, cough suppressants, if you're interested.
Oh, thank you. I'm fine actually. It's just a little allergy wheeze.
Yeah, no feeling.
You made it.
I did.
That's what it is.
when you two are actually Dr. How are you?
But that happens a lot. Are you talking about that? Yeah. Yeah, like a new age thing.
I was going through it, and I kept going, where's the beach?
Yeah, I know.
I didn't ask any, I kept asking superficial.
I know. I was pretty shocked. I mean, I looked at the picture, but it's not very good. Yeah, I sent one to a friend of mine, but I looked at. Well, this goes. No, I know. It's totally.
Yeah. You ever seen that thing called Jeff Dunham? Yeah. Yeah. And he has peanuts and peanuts goes. Yeah. When someone doesn't get something. Yeah. That was my sense.
Yeah, that was my take on the thing too. There's no crowd. Normal people. Yeah, every other month. Yeah. It's always every month. So always the second Saturday. Oh, okay. And then the same thing. Yeah, we go Friday. Like Saturday or something.
Oh, exactly.
There you go.
Wow. No.
That's
people that don't have those. It's that, yeah, it's that digester food,
Also from back there, I looked, this city was a market, and there's a very bright door, right through there, right behind the office.
Particularly if you're tired, that makes it harder. At least externally, I
Having fun?
Oh,
Does the retreat start on, do you know if it starts on a Monday or a Sunday or?
I believe it starts on a Sunday, the 30th of March.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's a Sunday and ends on a Wednesday.
Or Thursday or something.
Something like that.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. This is ours. It's not very exciting.
There you go. Don't go, Randall.
Oh, shoot.
Hello, there, here it is.
Okay.
Those are just angels getting their wings.
Oh, God. Sunday.
Sunday, well, that's it. Probably.
Well, it's a little change of pace. How about if we do some yoga instead of sit here and talk? Would you like that?
Sure.
Yes. yes.
Okay. So. Just be comfortable and notice your experience. Experience is here, isn't it? Just feel experience, feel the presence of experience. What is this? What is this that's here? Just feel it. What is it? What is it you're feeling? How are you feeling it? How can that happen? Don't meditate. Don't go into some kind of a trance. Just relax and be present and feel your experience. What is it that's here? What does it feel like? What does experience feel like? What texture does it have? You're here, aren't you? It's like always, here you are. What's that? Light is present in your field of vision. Always, your field of vision is always full of light, isn't it? Whether your eyes are open or closed, it's full of light. What is light? What does light feel like? How is light present? Experience shows up like light. What is that? Just feel it. Don't expect an answer. Don't think about it. Just feel what it feels like. What does light feel like? What's the presence of light feel like? What is it that's here? It's something, isn't it? What is it? Notice if your focus of attention drifting around. Sometimes you'll notice something you're seeing. Sometimes you'll notice something you're thinking. Sometimes you'll center on a sound or a feeling or something, and just sort of drifts around lazily here and there. How's that happen? What is this experience that's right here? Always here, isn't it? What's it feel like? What's its texture? What's it made of? Feel the presence of thought. Feel the presence of the thought field. Maybe thoughts coming and going, appearing and disappearing. And there's sort of a background, sort of texture, tinkling, different little flashes. There aren't really anything in particular. What does that feel like? What's that made of? Where is it? Where are your thoughts happening? It's right here. But where's here? And the here that thoughts have, and the here that vision has, where are they relative to each other? Where are your thoughts happening? Where's your vision happening? What are they happening in? What's experience made of? It's something, isn't it? It's not nothing. What is it? So fine. When you focus on something, it sort of gets sharp, it gets clear, and everything else sort of recedes and gets a little fuzzy. And then your focus shifts, and what you shift to gets sharp and clear, and everything else gets a little fuzzy. How's that happen? You focus on a particular sound, and all the other sounds sort of recede somehow. When you focus on another sound, and the sound you were listening to recedes. It's fuzzy. You look at something, and what you're looking at seems sort of sharper and clearer, and everything else gets fuzzy. And you look a little bit away, and it changes, and it gets fuzzy. How does that happen? When you're not looking at something, what's the thing you're not looking at made of? What texture does it have? And what's that texture like compared to the texture of something you are looking at? Experience is present, isn't it? Feel the presence of experience. Feel how it's present. Feel the way it's present. What is this present? What is it? How is it present? How is it here? Think about it, just feel it. How's it here? Feel what its here-ness feels like, its actuality feels. How is experience actual? How is it really happening? How is it real? What does that feel like? What does presence feel like? You feel this presence? Experience is present. The world is present. You're present. It's all the same presence, isn't it? What is it? What is this presence? Feel it. You can't make sense of it, but you can feel it, can't you? It's actual. I didn't say what it is, but it's so obvious. And there's no limit to how profoundly you can feel it, how intimately you can be with this presence. It's the presence of experience, the presence of actuality. It's not something we usually look at, is it? Feel how it has a profound intelligence to it, a profound wisdom. Just by feeling it, it's like it teaches you and it shows you things that you can't make any sense of, and you can't say, you can't think. all these qualities just showing up. Color and sound and feeling. You have to say what they are. Here they are. Don't let yourself get too tranced out. Just sort of, just feel the state, feel it with the obviousness of your experience. Just feel the presence. Just feel the experience itself. Just what's there. Just normal everyday experience. Just right here, like always. And that's your liberating presence. Stands ready for a nap. Yeah. These kinds of talks we should have milk and cookies after a certain point, you know. Like they used to do in kindergarten, where you get milk and cookies and lay down and have a little nap for half an hour.
You've got a lot of milk and cookies.
Are you gonna come back in March?
The plan is, yes, the plan is every 2 months. Is that right? This is January, February, March. Yes.
July.
I'm going to have to take off in about 15 or 20 minutes. So is there anything, any aspect of any of this that is confusing to you, or that is, that doesn't make sense, or that, that more than any others of it, or anything else? Then that would be a good time for us to look at that and see if we can explore this kind of thing. Yeah.
I got a sense in your talk today that helped my struggle with, I've always been trying to find out with various teachers, what's the difference between awareness and consciousness? And
good luck with that one.
What's the definition of it, and how am I relating to it? What just really, part of your discussion said, I can chase that all the way down, and the answer is going to be, there's not going to be an answer, except with whatever this is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was very, for me, that was very, and many enlightenments have to just let it go. Just let it go.
Yeah. You know, there's really only one condition here. There's only one thing happening here. And as humans, with our analytical mind, we're experts at looking at this aspect and that aspect and this and that and what's their relationship and all this. But at the end of the day, all that stuff is just spin doctoring.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you go looking for consciousness and then you go looking for what's appearing in consciousness, logically it seems like they would be two different things. But you can't find consciousness apart from from experience, and you can't find experience apart from consciousness. So manifested, they're the same reality. So why have two words and these two wildly different implications? You know, there's no experiencer, as far as I can tell. There's no experienced, as far as I can tell. There's just experiencing. And so if you logically analyze experiencing, you can say, well, if there's experiencing, then there must be an experienced and experiencer. You know, it says who? There may be a logical implication, but it's all just hot air. It's all just theoretical. When you go look at what's actually present, you find this, and it's a ball of wax.
Right.
You know, it doesn't have any parts. You can't pull pieces out, you know, and have this over here and this over here.
Feels like I could, but then at some point, there's, like you said, there's no bottom in the bottom, except that there's no bottom.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
You know, again and again, all of spirituality, the entirety of it, from its obvious aspect to its highest and most elaborate subtleties, are nothing other than this condition that's right here. So just looking at experience itself it gives all answers. It shows everything. There's nothing more than experience. And what experience is astoundingly subtle and weird and amazing and wonderful. And you are this. And so simply looking at this, you can discover everything. It all is plain to be seen. And experience is not hidden. Experience is not blocking itself. It's confusing as hell if you expect it to make sense. But once you get over that absurdity and get comfortable with the weirdness, then it's very easy to swim around in and explore, you know, because it's not hidden. It's right here. It's all nakedly open. This is experience. This is the whole shebang right here. And it's, you know, we're not used to looking at experience. We're so used to looking at, you know, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I own this and I'm interested in this, and we're so interested in looking at these little content and subsystems. You know, we don't usually look at experience itself, but it's right here. And in fact, there's nothing else right here. All this other stuff that we got all bent out of shape about is nothing other than abstractions of experience itself.
I heard a Tibetan teacher talking about what is the essence of this, of you, me, you know. He was going by a very high respected Tibetan awakening. And that teacher ancient time, and he was saying your essence of being is the pure light.
Mm-hmm.
And what one sees, the light is wavering. There's certain movement of thought, like, you know, wind goes down. That's not it. You know, once I heard that, and immediately I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to find this pure life. Pretty quickly, I realized it's chasing the tail. But still, what this teacher is saying is that the highest, once you realize, is this pure light.
Yes.
Even wavering.
Yeah, but you have to understand what he means by pure light. What he means by pure light is what I mean by radiant presence, which is this. If you look very closely at what this is, it's like looking closely at a dream. What is a dream? What's a dream made of? Well, you can't answer the question, but if you said it's made of a light, that's not a bad answer. It's a light that also might feel like sensation and might feel like sound and might feel like thought, but it's basically a light. If you look at what thought is, it's kind of like a northern lightsy, weird, subtle little phenomenon. Not what thought is the thoughts are about, but what thought is made of. What is thought? When you're thinking, something is present or you wouldn't know you're thinking. What is it that's present? And if you look at what's present, it's kind of a little, very subtle, fine, kind of a little wavering or something like northern lights. I don't know what, you know, whatever, look for yourself. And the same thing, what is sound? You know, you look at sound, and sound is this amazing little sparkling, tingling thing. what is light? Light is this amazing little sparkling, tingling thing. What is sensation? Well, it's this amazing little sparkling, tingling thing. So, you look around at your experience very, very closely, very intimately, and you find this amazing sort of sparkling, dynamic quality, You call it light, sure, that's fine. But it is what it is. Experience doesn't need to conform to being light or being this or that or the other. It's just about experience. So look at what experience is made of, and don't worry about what to call it. Because the names come after it. This is what it is, whatever you call it. And that's what this is what's important, not what someone is calling it.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to confuse being available to experience with a meditative state, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's very subtle. Meditation, well, from my perspective, let's see, and there's a lot of different philosophies and theories about this, so if you ask different people, you get a lot of different takes on it. But my take on it is that meditation is basically a pretense. It's a constructed state. A meditation that you can do or not do, a meditation that you can, where now I'm meditating, now I'm not meditating, it's basically a pretense. It's like a game, playing a game with yourself. Whereas what I would call real meditation is simply the presence of experience. Just noticing this that is here, that's always here. So, from my point of view, what's important is noticing what's always the case. It's not something you can do or not do. It's not something you can do well or do poorly. It's not something you can do better, may do more intensely or less intensely. It's just, what is absolutely common denominator, always the case. That's what's powerful. That's what's interesting. And all other conditions turn out to be spin doctorings of that. Right? So if you want to look at meditating, where are you going to look for it? In experience. If you want to look at non-meditating, where are you going to look for it? In experience. So non-meditating and meditating are both made of experience. So what experience is a much more interesting question to me than what meditating or non-meditating is. And it turns out to be, the core issue. It turns out to be what is powerful to know. The powerful information turns out to be what is this that's going on here. Because you discover what you are, you discover what the universe is, you discover how everything works, and that what you discover turns out to be just have wonderful, wonderful, empowering implications. In other words, it's not just like a kind of a mild, interesting curiosity to look at. It entails or it implies and enables a profound reorientation to your sense of self and your sense of what life is. Generally, I would say for the better. Most of our worldviews and our understandings about life consist of a censorship, consist of a diminishing, consist of a paring down of the full raw barrage of what experience is. Experience is everything, and then our take on it is our little, our favorite, what we've censored out of that. And of course, so that's a diminishment. So you're not getting more, you're getting less. So I say go to the full field, go to the whole enchilada, and find out what that is. And you may find out a lot that is excluded from sort of consensus reality versions of takes on it from a more human perspective.
I find when you're doing the yoga kind of thing, and also on it, if the penning the things in a more direct way, that things have feeling tones in subtle things. There's the light on the floor, the flipping. It feels like something. The light on the tissue paper is there's a feeling towards it, and it's actually there's something very soft and gentle about that subtlety. That's almost it almost feels like it's very connected to my falling asleep. It's not losing consciousness. It's more just this entering a richness. It's beyond the normal.
Sure.
It's really not like a concentrated state. It's actually it's not that.
Because experience intrinsically includes itself. Experience, when you're with a portion of experience, you're intrinsically with all of it, and you feel this sort of melting into this felt sort of inclusive, because it's the nature of experience that it is like that. Experience presents itself as if it was spread out. If you look at your experiential field, it may seem to be this big, vast, huge space with vision and thought and all this stuff is all over the place. But then if you look closely, that spreading out is sort of virtual spreading out, and it's actually just this, right here. Yeah. Not necessarily obviously so, but experience includes itself in a very, very profound way. So when you're with any portion of it, you're actually with all of it. And when you let yourself feel its texture, that becomes really explicit. I mean, a usual way of being with it, of, oh, you're a stand there, and that's a box of Kleenex, and this is a computer, sort of, by its very nature, cuts us off from we're not orienting towards that inclusion. We're enforcing and imposing a separation. You're not the computer, and the computer is not you. So right away, we're sort of, holding this apart. But experience isn't actually like that. If you feel experience, it's a continuum, most explicitly. And the way in which it's a continuum, again, as you point out, it's felt. It's really obvious and explicit. And it tends to resolve into itself. It tends to include itself, which feels delicious. I mean, it's wonderful. We discover that we are not a little thing in a big world. We are this wonderful, warm, inclusive holographic system which completely includes itself and is in harmony with itself, in which we happen to be. And this is felt immediately and obviously without needing to figure it out or think about it or be told it. And so on and so forth. I mean, the implications are really endless, but absolutely. Yeah, experience is something. Experience is real. It's actual. It is something, and it's available. You can, just by feeling it, let yourself be with experience as experience. Just feel experience, and just that simple, really, I mean, just ridiculously simple thing turns out to be profoundly powerful and transformative. Because it's not just inert, it's not just a mechanical condition, it's profoundly intelligent. Experience is an exercise of hyper-intelligence. So when you're feeling experience directly, you're plugged into the mainframe. And it's irrational, so it doesn't convey itself like words or a diatribe or something like that, but it's profoundly intelligent, and you become sensitive to the way in which that's so, which is, again, sort of a subtle, quiet, seemingly initially quiet kind of a sense through direct exposure. It's like sensitivity training. You have to become sensitive to it because we're so dulled to it by our really coarse way of slicing it and dicing it and holding it conceptually as consisting of separate objects and separate events and so on. Not. That's kind of a good place to start.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, today's been really nice. I mean, we really kept pretty much on focus, I feel like. So I hope that has conveyed itself to you in a way that is useful or interesting or entertaining, or at least in some way mildly amusing. And if so, today's a win, right? One for the good guys.
It's been an experience.
Yes, it's been an experience. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for coming down.
If you ever want to take a month off in Seattle, it doesn't rain down here, just remember that.